the way dreams sort of transform experience, even the dreamlike reflections during wakefulness transform experience. I want to say, okay, something about that process may also be at work in the dream per se, even independently of wakefulness, right?
Hmm.
So that's what I try to talk about in the paper, including existential dreams and transcendent dreams in particular. And I thought, okay, well, maybe we should go over that a little bit, talk a little bit about dreams and metaphoricity, and what it means to even say that a dream is metaphoric in any respect whatsoever. Um, I think it's rather common parlance in our area. Um, I think of several people who have made it the keynote basically in their scholarship, um, and and yet I'm not satisfied with the way dreams are being addressed within our community. I think there is a there is more to the metaphoricity of some dreams, especially impactful ones, than is captured in the characterization of how dreams metaphorically represent some aspects of the dreamer's life. So I was thinking our conversation might turn on that today, um, which is of interest to me. I don't know if it would be of interest to all of us, all three of us.
I think so. I'm wondering, I read your article again and thought how helpful it was to have those three dream examples. And I'm wondering if you can use those to kind of
Yeah,
situate this work. I
okay.
think that'll help.
That's an encouraging remark because that's exactly what I have in mind.
Oh,
Is
good.
going back to that structure within those dreams and talk a little bit about how metaphoricity in dreams like that is a cumulative process. It's not as though you have a metaphor and somehow it captures numerous aspects of your waking life. There are sort of repetitions of a metaphorically represented theme, and somehow cumulatively they seem to go to the heart of something that matters in your life. And so, yeah, maybe should I spend just a little time going back over what I think may help in our discussion, going over some aspects of that? So if I were to share this part of the document on screen, could I do that?
Yeah. Let me just make you.
Okay, share. Here we go. You
Yeah.
are host. Okay, so now I can share.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so okay, I think we're there. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, now I need to get my screen straightened out. Just a second, please. Okay. You see my full screen now?
Yep.
Okay. Um, I'm on record, and this is in some research on literary reading as well as the studies of impactful dreams, as suggesting that this passage from Borges' essay, A New Refutation of Time, sets out something like a model for the kind of metaphoricity, the kind of extended metaphors that Ricoeur ends up talking about as living metaphor. So I make quite a bit out of this initial example, even though it's neither a literary text nor a dream report, like I say in that opening paragraph, and that's part of what makes it of interest to me, because I think Borges may have had the same kind of intuition that I do about how metaphoricity works in literary texts, but also beyond. So let's first go through what I regard as something like the, I wouldn't call it a prototype, but it sets out a model for how extended metaphor exerts the influence that it does in either a literary text or a dream. Okay? So, time is a river that carries me along, and I am the river. It is a tiger that devours me, and I am the tiger. And it is a fire that consumes me, and I am the fire. And what I try to do in the paragraph or two that follow is talk about the structure of metaphoricity, not just any particular metaphor, because obviously there are several here, but talk about metaphoricity in this excerpt from the Borges essay. And it's fairly clear, I think, that there is some kind of repetition here. Time is a river, time is a tiger, time is a fire. And each time that kind of metaphoric theme is presented, there's also something resembling explication. It's a river in the sense that it carries me along. It's a tiger in the sense that time devours me. It's a fire in the sense that time consumes me. And then it does something interesting, I think, which is it shifts toward sort of the inclusiveness of metaphors of personal identification. And I am the river, and I am the tiger, and I am the fire. So just a little bit of background here. Based on this hunch, a few years ago, I did a study in which I tried to isolate some of the dreams, some of the impactful dreams, in fact, that had this kind of recurrent thematic structure. And when I did that, I found that those in which there was such a recurrence, dreamers were more likely to say it had some kind of inexpressible significance for them. It's not because they simply knew what the dream was about, but this dream matters in a way that even other significant dreams don't, right? In other words, that's more like how they would talk about exceptional dream impact, right? So in trying to get closer to that structure, in this rather contorted paragraph that follows the Borges excerpt, I try to link not only the sort of the primary metaphors, that time is a river, time is a tiger, time is a fire, and not only doing that with their sort of paraphrasing explications, but also doing that in relation to what makes it inclusive such that I can say, I am the river, I am the tiger, and I am the fire. And maybe I am river, tiger, fire, right? That's not a simple metaphor, right? And I think in the case of some literary reading and in the case of some significant dreams, it's that kind of cumulative impact of a succession of metaphors that gives the dream its experienced significance, its significant implications for the I who says, I am the fire, I am the tiger, I am the river. Okay. So I don't know if that model stands out as promising from where the two of you sit, but for several years now, I've been going back to these Borges lines as something like a model for the way at least some impactful dreams work. Okay. And that's why, let's see if we can go down to the hotel dream now. And that's why you see me in this manuscript doing something very similar to what I just did with the Borges lines, doing something very similar with what I now, or have for some time, called the hotel dream, right? And in that dream, there is again a succession of episodes, each one of which seems to express a theme. Time is X prime, X double prime. Well, yes, something in each episode, I won't try to commit myself to what that something is, seems to be characterized as coercive intimacy. Across episodes, there's a worry about rapists in an Alberta hotel hallway. There's unwelcome assistance to fellow travelers in a hotel in France. And there's aversion to a series of voices who seem to know what is best for the dreamer. And my comment that follows is, yeah, it's certainly not as simple as the Borges structures, as the Borges structure, but there is a kind of repetitive, sequential, compound metaphoric representation of off-limits intimacy here, right? Instead of time being sort of thematic, whatever time is, however it is experienced, here, off-limits intimacy, that is intimacy that is inauthentic, somehow is being represented not just once, but twice and a third time. So, so what I really, excuse me, what I'm really trying to do is through this example, to begin with, demonstrate the parallel with the structure in the Borges lines about time. And I want to suggest, belabor the evidence right now. I'll allude to some of it in just a moment, but I want to suggest that progression, that repetition, that increasing inclusiveness of the representation of a theme moves in the direction of selfhood. It's not just me in the hotel in southern France or southern Alberta. It's not just me in the hotel in France. It's not just me listening to those voices. The me that I am sort of pervasively is concerned, apprehensive, deeply disturbed by off-limits intimacy, inauthentic intimacy like this, right? So let me just pause for a minute and say, all right, does at least the analogy that I put in place between the Borges lines and the hotel dream, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I really appreciate you putting the Borges example, present that one first, because that's a very simple and a very clear example of meaning transformation. And when I think about metaphors, I think about you're playing with the meanings and you're kind of describing one thing with another. And in doing so, you kind of shapeshift the meanings and the emotions. And then when you go into that hotel dream, that there's such a sequential transformation of emotions in that dream too. It's more nuanced than the literary example, but certainly certainly we can kind of trace the changes.
Yeah. Let me interrupt for just a second, because one of the things that I hope stands out is the cumulative effect of that sequence of sort of thematically coherent images. It's not just that they somehow touch on the same theme, let's say, inauthentic intimacy, but as they progress across episodes, it becomes intensified and basically so inclusive that it seems to be me, not just me as it was in each of those particular moments. It seems to be me in general, as I am in general. Okay. And then that's a tricky transition, one that Ricoeur talks about more sensitively, I think, than anybody else in the literature on metaphoricity. But he talks about it in a way that is congruent with the way I talk about an unfolding metaphoric structure in a dream like the hotel dream. It's not just that one metaphor replaces another. It's not just that somehow it is better than the other, but the fact that it is an extended metaphor that progressively amplifies and extends the thematic sense of some aspect of a person's experience. That's what matters. It's not as though you can come out of this dream and say, well, metaphorically, it is about this young dreamer's relationship with her deceased father, because it is. It's a bereavement dream, right? But that's not all it is. It's a dream about how this is a theme that is pervasive in this dreamer's life, to the point that she will be able to say at the end, this is who I am. And at the end of this, toward the end of this dream, the cumulative effect just touched me down deeply somewhere. That is not just my relationship with my father. It's not just that I was born in southern Alberta and I know that kind of hotel. It's not just my relationship with my siblings. Somehow deeply here, this is how I live my life. This is how I am alive in my life. So that kind of inclusiveness comes through the extended metaphor, not any particular metaphoric, quotes, representation. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. I think this consciousness, if you understand consciousness not as a continuous process that's unfolding, then yes, it as you kind of, as we go through waking life, we're experiencing various situations, and that kind of helps us evolve like our lives, our conscious awareness evolve, and in dreams also, as different dream characters come on stage, and different experiences are added to the dreaming experience. It kind of, there's that dynamic interplay of what's surrounding us and what's happening inside of us.
Yeah, and the word interplay that you just used interests me, because that's a sign, I think, that you recognize the way these things are intertwined, not just one referring to the other. It's not as though A metaphorically refers to B. It's somehow metaphorically refers to B A prime refers to B prime and A double prime refers to B double prime. It's not even that, but the way that the metaphors are extended, they seem to penetrate each other. In the phenomenological account of this kind of metaphoricity, they use the term that's translated now from the German as intertwining, entwickelnd. And it's an intertwining rather than standing for. It's not a dream symbol in the sense that A stands for B, but it's the intertwining that matters within the phenomenological account.
Mm-hmm.
So hold on to I can't remember the word you used just a moment ago. Interplay, that was it.
Interplay, yeah,
So
interplay.
hold on to that word, because the interplay between those episodes is, I think, crucial in understanding how an extended metaphor seems to unfold. It not only becomes, quotes, intense, which it does. It not only becomes intense, it also becomes more nearly like a, a metaphor that captures deeply my sense of self. Right? So it's interplay, intertwining, one sort of representation of a theme permeating another, and yet their cumulative effect is crucial to understanding where the person is when he or she awakens from the dream. Here I am with the cumulative effect of this, the extended metaphor, if you will, such that, yes, it's the kind of off limits that's there in the hallway. It's the kind of off limits intimacy that's there in superficial relations with my siblings. It's the kind of extended and even anonymous and inauthentic intimacy that's associated with these voices, one of whom probably is the dreamer's mother in some way that the word is fits. But it's not just one or the other, it's not just their additive effect, but that they become intertwined in a way that becomes more deeply penetrating at the same time that it enables even the dreamer to say something about this is a dream about inauthentic intimacy. No, that's too simple, right? And then the dreamer might have to go back to the dream itself to say, no, it's more than that. It's inauthentic intimacy that also has a kind of aggressive tone and so on. So it's a cumulative effect and an inclusive effect that begins to make it seem like me in a way that needs to be said, in a way that needs to be articulated even more. And that's where Ricoeur comes back into the picture, because he talks about living metaphor as if a dream like this involves living metaphor, that each successive image invites metaphoric re-expression of that theme. And that's maybe the most complete way I can put it. A metaphor invites re-expression of that metaphoric theme. Excuse me. So that's why it may make some difference to ask you next whether you made sense out of what I talked about as sort of the levels of metaphoricity in dreams like this. There's semantic resonance. There is detectable bi-directional metaphoricity, and this comes out of the literary metaphor literature. Excuse me. And it is not regularly taken up by people in the dreams area. But the notion of bi-directional metaphoricity is as though not only is time a river, it is also a tiger, And it means that in some ways a river is a tiger, or no, a tiger is a river, right? As though there's a kind of a persistent movement toward the terminal character of your life, a river. That kind of terminal move, that movement toward something terminal is evident because not only is A a B, but B is an A. A tiger is a river, and a river is a tiger. Rapist in the hallway in southern Alberta is my siblings trying to get me to pack when I don't really want to. And yet, and it goes the other way too. My siblings who are trying to get me to pack, even though I was responsible about this and they weren't. That's the same kind of coerciveness in some way that's represented in the hallway in southern Alberta with the rapists who are lurking there. It goes back and forth. A is a B and B is an A. That's the way metaphoric representations work in some literary texts, not all. And my argument is that's how it works within impactful dreams, such that they move toward metaphors of personal identification. Right? So I don't know if that hierarchy makes any more sense, having talked about the hotel dream and its sort of parallel with the Borges lines, but it's that movement toward metaphors of personal identification and the sort of the inclusive characterization of who I am toward the end of that dream that I characterize as involving abstract ontological limits. What is off limits, or what is inauthentic intimacy? Yeah, that's an abstract category. What is it that makes it even intimacy, right? We worry about that with regard to rapists. We worry about that with regard to anonymous voices. But there's a movement towards something like an abstract concept here. But it never reaches determinacy. It's always moving closer toward a radical limit, but it doesn't attain determinacy. So that section that follows really is a section that begins to at least explain, based on this understanding of some poetic metaphors, how these dreams work. They work like poetic metaphors in their bidirectionality and their progressive movement toward these sort of supersensible, but still very personal concepts. All right. Totalizing abstract ontological types and so on. So let me close the screen and let's just talk about what does and doesn't make sense about all that, okay? You ready for that?
Sure.
You have to stop sharing.
Okay, I just wanted to check to be sure we're ready.
Perfect. Oh, yeah, yeah.
So all of that's very fuzzy and abstract, isn't it?
It feels like I've been sitting here kind of thinking about cooking and cooking something down to its essential qualities, and that this way of the metaphor is both amplifying a particular state of being and so widening and deepening at the same time with each of the three situations and each of the three ideas of time. When I think about time as being a river that carries me, but I'm also the river that is doing the carrying. And time is a tiger that is going to devour me, which is like this sense of danger from without coming within, but I am also the one devouring. And then the last one of the fire, which is an internal combustion, where I am consuming myself, and that leads to ashes and transformation of self. And there's a real sense of time. So I get to the end of it and I have this sense of being in time as both feeling carried and stalked and transformed.
Yeah, you did a nice job in what you just said, because you caught the bidirectionality of it very nicely, I thought. Right?
Mhm.
It's not just that A is a B, but B is an A. It's not just that time is a tiger. And it's not just that a tiger is a river or but you've heard me say the whole list.
Mhm.
It's not just that A is a B and it's not just that B is an A, but it's somehow their interplay, their intertwining that constitutes sort of the culminating moment of these extraordinary dreams.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's encouraging is I thought you did a very, quite effective paraphrase of the bidirectionality notion just a moment ago.
Thank you.
She also
Mm.
did it in a metaphor of cooking.
Yes.
Mhm.
I know. Yeah.
There is something about a reductive sauce where you get away from the reductive, but it's a deepening of flavors and a deepening. So you're adding things and reducing and adding and reducing at the same time. So widening the image, while at the same time it distills the image into, oh, this is who I am in the world. This is who I am now. I am vulnerable. I am responsible and not responsible. I am being forced to be responsible. I want to be responsible. And there's loss if I'm not responsible enough. And at the same time, there's this. So if you put them all together, that young girl kind of, where's my sense of self? Where's my sense of self-protection? And who am I responsible for and to? And how is that all fitting with this family in this time?
Let me do one more thing in relation to what you just said, and it's a direct reflection of what Linda just did. Ricoeur would have loved the fact that you extended the metaphor to cooking, right?
Mm.
What's going on here is lively cooking, right? Um, and and that's the sense of living metaphor that I think Ricoeur is alert to, and it is more nearly an outcome than any abstract category could be. So I use the as an abstract category here. I talk about you know, coercive or inauthentic intimacy. Well, yes, that's an abstraction that is in some ways perhaps appropriate, but it's more than that, right? It's more than that, and you need another metaphor to say something about the more that it is. Somehow time, or somehow rivers and tigers, yeah, rivers and tigers are somehow being cooked, right? Yeah, I'm not just interested in tigers, and I'm not just interested in rivers. Somehow I'm interested in what they are when they are cooked. Right? So, so I really am grateful, really, for the way you fairly spontaneously, shifted toward the cooking metaphor, right? And there is something about it that even as you begin to elaborate what it means to cook tigers and rivers, right? Um, as you begin to elaborate that there's further mystery, if you will, in the metaphor. At the same time, yeah, there's something like a cooking going on, such that I can talk about rivers and tigers in the same breath. Right? There's a sense of their sameness, even though it doesn't fit in tidily into any category.
Well, cooking takes time.
That's right. Excuse me again. Yes, it does. Yeah, unless of course you're in my kitchen, because sometimes I'm very hasty and I regret it later in the night. But nonetheless, cooking in some sense of cooking that has some importance takes time.
Mhm.
There's other cooking that you just throw it in the microwave, and but cooking somehow in its fullness takes time. It sure does.
Yeah, in Zen Buddhism, cooking is actually a spiritual practice.
Yeah, good point. Nicely done. Yeah, and I think also your reference to the Zen tradition could be brought home, so to speak, in a Zen Buddhist poetics. In other words, I think that's the way haiku at least often work as well, is this kind of layering of one metaphor on another. And somehow you end up with more than you had in either case, and yet you can't say what the more is. I think there is something to be said about haiku having that structure.
Don, I was wondering if I could bring in the idea of the continuity theory, because I mean, I've heard you say this isn't about, this isn't about where life is, or this metaphor, this image relates directly to life. But at the same time, what I'm hearing is that this metaphoricity really is helping her understand her life with all of these different metaphors, with all of these different playings and the images playing together and the deepening and the widening. It still is grounded in how she understands her life with her family. And so to me, even though we're not dealing with this means we're going to go on a trip somewhere, or this is about the trip, it really still feels like this would fit in the continuity hypothesis of, but this is about and helping me live a deeper and richer life.
Yeah, I think that's a notion that calls for some development and articulation. I'm still making my peace with that literature, by the way. And there are ways in which I'm still not satisfied. And this is about as concrete as I
It can
can.
be, well, and it can be very concrete. There are people who are taking the continuity hypothesis and using it in a very concrete way of A equals B. But even this level of depth feels like it's still grounded in her being, in
Yeah.
her understanding of her life.
Yeah.
And that to me feels like still a continuity, even if it's not one that's seen on the surface.
Yeah, and I think you put your finger on it right now. The kind of continuity that I am worried about is the kind that makes it into a unidirectional metaphor. A is a B, right? That kind of continuity, as far as I'm concerned, is well, stultifying compared to what impactful dreams do. That's stultifying. And at the same time, there is a certain kind of respect I have for that. I'll get cranky about it right now. That sort of simplistic notion of the A is a B kind of standing for something in my life, metaphoricity. It's not as though I have complete disrespect for those who want to talk about the A is a B kind of metaphoricity. And when I was thinking about what we might talk about today, I was thinking, in some ways, this takes me at least back to the psychoanalytic account of condensation. Not everyone, and I think even Ernest Hartman didn't do this with any consistency, but he at least understood it. not everyone wants to talk about the two aspects of condensation that Freud distinguished. Because he distinguished a kind of condensation, which is like a standing for, like what is how a symbol works, and the language's symbol is notoriously ambiguous. But in general, he had in mind A as a B kind of representations. Something in the dream stands for something outside of it. But Freud also talked about another form of condensation, and it really is he used in some of the translations and in some of the scholarship on the psychoanalytic account, it used the language of fusion, as though something within the dream becomes fused with something else. And that kind of fusion is a form of condensation, but it's not an A as a B kind, right? So already Freud, I think, anticipated this contrast. It's often lost, regularly lost in the psychoanalytic tradition, I believe, because in general, they want to say A within the dream stands for B in the dreamer's life. And they lose the sense of bidirectionality.
Well, maybe that's a function of the depth that we're willing to explore any particular dream. That we on the surface we can see on the surface A equals B, but if we go down below the surface, we can see B equals A, and we can start looking at all the different ways the dreams are mixing and deepening our sense.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I sometimes wonder if the continuity hypothesis folks are staying at the surface on purpose to try and make the point that our dreams really are connected to us as the dreamers. But the depth is where I think you see that most clearly.
Yeah. Again, I'm very sympathetic to your way of elaborating on that notion. It's at least an echo of the same kind of concern I have about people who are sort of committed to the continuity hypothesis, where the version of it that says A is a B, right? This is part of my suspicion about what's missing in that account of how dreams acquire their significance. That is, you need to go beyond that one way, unidirectional form of metaphoricity. You need to get more closely related to the bidirectionality of the metaphors before they, in a sense, penetrate the dreamer's life, before they become, before you begin to say about them, this is who I am. I am.
It's like the dream repeats and reflects and then refracts and shows a different piece. And by the time you get 5 or 6 dreams, whether in one night or over a week, you can start looking at them as a whole and seeing, well, I can anyway, and I see, I should speak for myself, so I can get a bunch of dreams together and see how they're all wading in the same pool. They're all talking about the same thing, but from all these different directions to try and get to that deepening sense.
Yeah. So what you just did is interesting in my current life context, because I have a graduate student right now who's working with that very notion, and she's doing it across dreams. So the way I talked in the last few minutes, and in this paper as well, it's all happening within a dream, is the way I present it, right? What she's trying to do is say, all right, but now let's talk about a dream series. And how do you identify dream series in a way that is appropriate to, I think, the understanding you just suggested, such that somehow one dream deepens its predecessor and is deepened by its predecessor in that bi-directional way, because that's what she's trying to bring out about dream series as well. It's not as though it's cumulative, as though you get more of something, but you get this bi-directionality, this the imagery from one dream begins to become intertwined with the imagery of another, and laying that out subtly is something that calls for all the nuance any dreamer can muster. At least the same kind of nuance, I would contend, that's necessary to read T.S. Eliot. Right? So a certain kind of connoisseurship is involved, and it's important to keep the edge of the metaphoric category, if you will. Keep that edge of the category open so that it can be revised, like Ricoeur says, happens with living metaphor. So, but another sign, I think, that you at least, I think you understand where this could go, right? Go to dream series.
I think it goes right to the marshes. I have a new metaphor for you. The marshes, which are a living, wonderful, creative ecosystem that get daily flushed with seawater, and then with fresh water, and then with seawater, and then with fresh water, and every tidal movement brings new life and new. Anyway, so it's like that's what I think about dream series. It's like it's that movement, that interplay between all the different perspectives.
So, is there an aspect of your life that has that? Do you live in a marsh?
I do. I live in Victoria. I'm overlooking not a marsh, but the inner harbor. But my partner got me into birding, and we go to marshes all the time. So there's something about them that just has
can
that same sense of cooking.
Just on here. Not too long ago, I read a book about Aboriginal groups in Western Australia. And there are parts of Western Australia which are where the coastline is actually the coastline separates the coast is separated from a sandbar and another sandbar. And that means that depending on how the tides are working and so on, you take a boat out into the coastal waters, you can get stranded on a sandbar, or you can wash you over a sandbar, and you may not be able to get back to the other side, and so on. So it's not the marsh, but it's as though there are on the western coast of Australia places where it is hard to get back and forth, hard to do the A as a B and the B as an A with the influence of the ocean currents and so on. So, yeah, I can work with that metaphor too.
I love it. I love it. And that's the question, right? How is life like a dream?
Yeah.
How is life like a metaphor? We used to play that game in college. It was so much. It was hilarious. we tried to trip each other up with life is like.
Yeah.
And I would say life is like a pizza, and then someone else would have to say how it was like a pizza. Life is like a door. Life is like a shoelace. I would have to try and make it work.
And so now let's go to the other
The
side.
simile game. Yeah.
Ask the question, and I think the literary theorists haven't come to terms with this either. And that is, how does a leitmotif, how does a theme, in a sense, stay in place across these permutations?
Yes.
Somehow, yeah, it's the same theme, and yet it's not the same thing, right? And literary theorists have not done a very good job of talking about the leitmotif, like in Wagner, for example. What is how are you going to define leitmotif? Something like that. And I know a pretty darn good phenomenological account of literary leitmotif. But is it a really satisfying one that would satisfy Mark Blagrove as much as it might satisfy me? I doubt that, actually. But what I'm trying to do is say, yeah, all right, we're talking about a problem that may be pivotal for people in the literary community, and somehow, I think, are a little bit too ready to let it go away in our studies of dreams.
Mm.
So what you just did, I think, is bring out the possibility that we will be well served by researchers among us who concern themselves with dreamy leitmotifs, like Wagner was also quite prepared to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't want to pretend like we're solving anything by drawing these different analyses together and beginning to contrast them and so on. I don't think we solved any problems in the last half hour, but I'm quite satisfied that the three of us at least could continue this conversation fruitfully.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
This is
And I want to,
extraordinary. And
I just shared a quote in the chat.
mm,
I saw it. Yeah.
This is Chen Dao, Chinese philosopher that lived, he lived over 2,000
mhm,
years ago. What one thinks about during the day is what one dreams about at night. And that kind of goes back to the continuity theory.
mm,
But I also want to highlight my understanding of dreaming and waking not as two separate processes, but one unified conscious process. And so that acknowledges the bi-directional metaphoricity that Dong talked about earlier.
Yeah, and again, it does make sense to me to go back to the Zen poetics, the tradition of Zen poetics, to at least begin to come to terms with this, because they are very respectful of those crossovers where there is interplay, where there are fusions, rather than something mirroring something on the other side of a boundary. They're I wish I could remember. There's an article that comes to mind that is no longer close enough to it to let it be helpful here, but it's the dream of the butterfly.
Oh, Zhuangzi.
Okay, it's like no, it's not that, the butterfly dreaming
I became
about,
the butterfly in my dream, but that
it's all about the transition.
I became me. Yeah.
But it's all about the transition, is the point of the article that I'm referring to. And I don't claim to know the Taoist literature well, but I do remember that article in particular as one that highlighted how it is the transition, whatever that is, however you understand the transition and the fusion between what is within the dream and outside of it. That's where you need to go to at least appreciate what the Taoist account of those dreams might be like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do in my work I lead people into dreams while awake, so waking dreams. And people they have that waking awareness while they're dreaming, while dreams are unfolding in their minds.
Yep.
And one of the most recent dreams that I'm working with is with someone who is feeling stuck at work. And in the dream, they were underwater, and they had this they were playing in the water, and like manipulating the flow of the currents and letting water going through their dream body, and having the recognition that this is related to my feeling of stuck, feeling stuck at work, and this is the type of feeling that I should try and create in my waking life. So
and let me just say something in a completely different way that I think still touches on the theme you just brought out. There are some people within the phenomenological tradition too talk about sort of thinking at the edge. And it means not seeing the relation between A and B, but thinking at the edge, sort of between A and B, right? And Genlin, for example, is a person who talks that way some of the time. So there's thinking at the edge, which I think calls for living metaphor, calls for laying out, entertaining, explicating, and letting go of the next metaphor. That's roughly speaking, thinking at the edge. So if I've understood you just now, that person in your experience is the person whose experience you just referred to is telling you, yeah, I think I'm prepared to think at the edge where this image works within something like a dreamy world that I'm in, and a world that is my not so dreamy world, right? Somehow these worlds are intertwined. So if I understood you just now, that's roughly speaking what Genlin has in mind when he talks about thinking at the edge as well. It's like the dream looks at you and the dream looks back. You look at the dream and the dream looks back at you. And somehow that's where you need to be.
yeah. Yeah, and that's how transformation takes place.
Yeah, that's right. That's where the next metaphor comes from. That's where living metaphor takes its next step, if you will. The next iteration begins there.
Yeah, I think in Zen that's called sudden enlightenment.
Say that again? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the phrase.
Sudden enlightenment.
Okay.
So the sudden realization.
Yeah. The word sudden is the word that stands out for you in what you just said, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can have that moment of, oh, like, oh, that, right? I didn't understand that before. Oh, that, right? If that's what you had in mind, at least that's how I understood you. So the student that I mentioned a few minutes ago, who's working with me right now, the graduate student, she's actually in Victoria. She lives in Victoria. And she would do well to be a part of conversations like this.
I think she would.
I'm sure she would fit in.
We should get her into the IASD.
I was just thinking that.
And you know, she knows about IASD, but she's not a member. And I haven't suggested to her that she might pick up with this conversation. I haven't suggested to her, I haven't suggested that to her because I think, well, no, you got to be ready to join ASD, right? Um, and I have misgivings about that because there are conversations I think she's missing out on. But our conversation today is one that she would feel quite at home in it. She would feel quite at home.
Well, next year's IASD conference is online, so it's quite accessible and affordable. Maybe that's something that can make it enticing.
Yeah. And as you can already hear, I'm sure I'm not above suggesting to her that she do it. In other words, yeah, take the plunge, if you will, and
I would hope you're not above it. It's a great organization. Yeah. Hmm. I'm sorry, I thought you were kidding.
no,
Hmm. Good.
but not.
Hmm.
And I'm hoping that the 2026 conference can be in Vancouver.
Yeah, maybe.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that part of the world for me right now because I have a niece who lives in Oregon, who's wanted me to visit for some time so we can drink Pinot Noir together. And I have a long-standing friend, Bob Carey, who is actually in Victoria, a clinical psychologist and an important friend in a variety of ways. And I sometimes sort of flirt with the idea of going to the coast, seeing Bob Carey. Right now, I don't think I have someone who can justifies an extended stay in Vancouver, but I like Vancouver enough that I'd probably do that anyway. Then go further to visit my niece in Oregon. So that's excuse me, that's a thought I have about a trip to take. And if ASD is in Vancouver, well, maybe we can make all of that fit together.
Yeah, yeah.
That would be great.
Work in progress.
Oh, I hate to say I have to go, but I'm at the end of my time here.
Yeah, and I need to go as well. So I think we are converging on that moment.
Mhm.
This has been really, really good. I loved reading it. It was hard to read, but your explication of it today and going through the dreams was really, really helpful. And I really enjoyed this.
Well,
Yeah, so interesting. And yeah,
Yeah.
the philosophical aspect of this conversation I really enjoyed.
yeah. Well, that kind of interdisciplinarity, as far as I'm concerned, is called for. It's not just an option for some of us. It's really somehow it's called for. So makes harder reading. It's part of what makes that paper difficult. At the same time, yeah, I think it's important to do. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Don, for lead us in this discussion.
Awesome. All right.
Yes.
Well, you both have a good evening.
Yeah. Same to you,
Yeah.
Jean.
Thanks.
All right. Take
Take
care,
care.
It
everyone.
was a pleasure. Look forward to the next one, Belinda. These are really
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, I have some idea for the next one.
Good.
Just a quick mention, maybe. I was going to bring another speaker in, but she's not quite ready yet. She's going through some health issues, so I thought maybe we'll just make it a fun, festive one, and make it a holiday celebration, and just get people to join and talk about the various things that they've done this year related to dreams.
That sounds great. Yeah, I'd be up for that.
Yeah. I can already think of another person who I bet you would be up for it. That is Leslie Ellis.
Yeah, exactly.
I bet you would.
And Kristen Lang might be, and yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, so I'll send out an email and float some dates and see what works.
Okay,
All right.
wonderful. Thank you very much.
Take care, both of you.
Bye for
Thank
now.
you. You too.